Okay, good evening, everybody. It's 7:01, so we will officially call to order. Sego ani buju endio wachia kwekwe. As the mayor of the city of Kingston, I offer these words in the spirit of this gathering. Let us bring our good minds and hearts together as one to honor and celebrate these traditional lands as a gathering place of the original peoples and their ancestors who were entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. It is with deep humility that we acknowledge and offer our gratitude for their contributions to this community, having respect for all as we share the space now and walk side by side into the future. So with that, I will ask Mr. Clerk if we have a quorum.
Yes, Mayor Patterson, we have quorum.
Okay, there's nothing for committee of the whole closed meeting. Approval of the addeds, we have a couple of changes to miscellaneous business item number 2 and some communications. Can I have a mover for the addeds, please? Moved by Councillor Holland, seconded by Councillor Neal. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Are there any disclosures of potential pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, then we will move on. We have no presentations this evening, but we do have one delegation. Tom Greening, Executive Director of Home-Based Housing, will appear before Council to speak to Deferred Motion number 1 and Information Report number 5 with respect to the approval of application for Heritage Permit 484 Albert Street and 620 Princess Street. Mr. Greening, you have the floor and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, everybody. Can I be heard okay this evening? Okay, terrific. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak to Council this evening. I understand that on your agenda is a recommendation from the Heritage Committee to allow home-based housing to apply for a permit to remove the manse, which is currently located at the property at 484 Albert Street. And tonight I'd like to take a few minutes, if I may, to talk about the overall plan for this location. Going back to the spring and summer of 2019, Homebase held discussions with the congregation of Princess Street United Church, which concluded with the purchase of the property last fall. Members of the church were excited that the property would be repurposed for a social good and that would aid the future youth in the city of Kingston. Can I have the next slide, please? 2 weeks ago, Home-Based Housing submitted all plans and reports to the City Planning Department detailing the overall concept and the 4 phases of the proposed development at that site. These are now available for review through the city's Dash system. What we're referring to now as the Kingston Youth Services Hub will provide a range of different community programs that will support not just vulnerable youth, but there will be opportunities for youth from all walks of life to become involved in the activities at this new hub. If I could have the next slide, please. Currently in Kingston, Lily's Place Shelter for Families is at capacity. The In From the Cold shelter is full tonight. The Integrated Care Hub is at or near capacity. And the Kingston Youth Shelter is full almost every night. We know that there's an immediate need for additional supportive housing programs and services, and the proposed Kingston Youth Services Hub provides part of the required solution for youth going forward. Next slide, please. The Kingston Youth Services Hub will offer 4 components, each independent of the other, and able to offer youth 1 program or the ability to participate in all of the programs that will be developed on the property. Phase 1 of our development is the redevelopment of the existing One Roof program. One Roof has existed in Kingston for the past 3 years, and it brings together many different youth serving organizations under one roof. Counseling, employment services, housing intake, harm reduction services, nursing services, all of the services that you've heard about lately associated with the Integrated Care Hub have their origins with what we've been able to create at the One Roof program. Homebase has recently received a federal 5-year grant for approximately $4.8 million to improve services for youth in the city of Kingston. One building at 44 Albert Street is currently undergoing very significant renovations and will be the new home for One Roof beginning in January of 2021. The funding will allow for home-based housing to purchase enhanced mental health services from other organizations in the city, which will be delivered at the new renovated accessible site. Additionally, all the services that will be developed at the new One Roof location will be developed with the lens of Indigenous programs and services. Phase 2 of our development will involve building 48 new supportive housing apartments for formerly homeless youth. Some of these new apartments will include a new service, which Homebase is referring to as emergency housing, which will provide immediate intake to short-term self-contained apartments as an alternative to emergency shelter services. Phase 3 of the development will occur at the same time as the supportive housing development, and it will involve a youth, arts, and culture center and will be located in the current church building. Banquet facilities, luncheons for local businesses, community youth theater, Friday night coffee houses with live music, art displays, art sales will all be organized by and focused on the talents of the Kingston youth. Phase 4 will be a Princess Street Cafe to be used by the local neighborhood. This will be a job skills training program where marginalized youth will be able to work and develop employment skills. We're reviewing the operations of the cafe through a social enterprise lens and foresee revenues assisting with some of the activities associated with the Arts and Culture Center. Next slide, please. Okay. Actually, we'll skip the slide and go to the next one, please. This slide simply points out many of the different organizations that are currently involved with the One Roof program. And we believe that these organizations will also be involved in the development of some of the new programs that I've just outlined. Final slide, please. As I mentioned at the outset of my commentary, we're aware that the city needs additional affordable housing and support housing. Homebase has been working on this project for the past 1.5 years, and I'm sure many of you are aware these projects are always challenging, and we look forward to council's support to turn the concept into reality. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Greening. At this point, we will open it up to questions from council. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not sure if it's okay to go back to a slide, but just if I'm curious about the building, the component that would be on the site at Princess Street where the current manse is, that smallish building, if we could see that.
Actually, I think if we go to slide 2. Great,
yeah, that's perfect. Okay, yeah. So then I'm curious, it was a lot. Sure. It's a lot to sort through the development of the various phases and the different programs. So I'm curious about the use of that space and the timeline for that part.
Sure. So the space that you see on the right-hand on the right-hand side of this slide represents the future cafe program that will be developed there. That is the current location of the manse. And in fact, that building will be linked to the back of what you see in the church. And in the residential building on the left, in fact, will be commercial kitchen facilities that will support not just the bank facilities in the church, but also will support the activities in the cafe. So those buildings will be linked in the future.
Great, and so that leads into my next question, which is that with all the various programs and services offered, it seems as though they all feed into each other. It's a real campus approach, and I'm happy to see that. I don't have a question really, but I guess I'm sort of interested in the concept of having not just one roof, but this entire sort of delivery model of like a campus program.
That's wrong. Can you make that into a question, or we just?
I think I'm okay. It's yeah. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council? Any questions? Yeah, Councillor Neal.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for your presentation. I'm the district councillor, as you know, and I've received several emails and a couple of calls in the last while regarding questions about why the demolition, which is phase 4, as I understand it, is the first thing that you're seeking. And in fact, I just received the technical review for the upcoming OP and planning program information coming in December and January. So I'm a little curious about why there's a rush to achieve phase 4 ahead of approvals. The community and I support saving the church, and we support the program, but there are a lot of questions about transit accommodation and parking and other things that we can't address until it comes to planning. So why are we pushing phase 4 ahead of the planning process?
Mr. Green?
Yeah, I'm assuming that the answers to some of those questions may also come up later on when we get, or when you to this item on the agenda this evening. I can say, and again, it's a little hard to describe without the slide up, but the access to the One Roof program, in fact, will be on top of what will be the service corridor for utilities coming in from Princess Street. So we're trying to maximize accessibility to the One Roof program, which sits behind where you saw the retail cafe. So I say that as a general statement. I can also say that at this point, home-based housing, as I did say, has been working for 1.5 years on this project. We've currently garnered approximately $7 million of support from other levels of government and private donors. And one of the contributors is a federal infrastructure program that does require us to demonstrate that we're making headway on construction of the Youth Arts and Culture Center. And there are some pressures on us to be able to demonstrate that by December 31st of 2020. Now, how we're able to do that, we're looking at different approaches. But Councillor Neal, I also don't think it is the case that if this motion is approved tonight, that we'll be making an application for demolition of the manse until it's absolutely required to get on with construction.
Thank you.
Councillor Kiley?
Thanks, Mayor Patterson, through you. Mr. Green, thanks for the presentation. You kind of half answered the question I had in your response to Councillor Neal. So maybe I could just ask it more pointedly and you could reiterate or correct me if I'm wrong. So do I understand that you need to have the manse demolished by the end of the year? Is that the federal funding that's at play that we heard about in the last council meeting?
That had been certainly on our agenda. I'm not sure if it's realistic. And in fact, I've had some conversations over the last few days about potential other ways that we could remedy the situation that would not involve the demolition of the manse by December 31st of 2020. Some of those may come up in discussion later on tonight on your agenda.
Okay, so that's on federal funding. You mentioned other levels of government. Presumably there's provincial money in here. Could you also explain the timelines and constraints that you have with that, please?
Yes, home-based housing has received a $2.3 million commitment of funding from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for the residential component of this project. They also required that we be able to get on with construction prior to the end of 2020. We have, I believe, been able to demonstrate to MMAH the significant amount of work that we have done to advance this project. You know, there has been, I can just say that there has been an awful lot of work already done to get this project now ready to go before the planning committee. And in terms of our counterparts with the city of Kingston, I believe that we have a high level of confidence that the province is going to continue to work with us to support this project going forward.
Thank you.
Rostroff?
I'm supposed to do that. Yeah, make sure you guys hear me. Thank you for your presentation tonight, Mr. Greening. And I just want a little bit clarification. I mean, I am on the Heritage Committee, and I just remind Council that we did vote in favor of the application, and which included the demolition of the manse. And I think that we were given good reasons for it, and so we did approve it. But I think that one of the deferrals was to consider the last council meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor Patterson, but it was because we wanted to examine whether the manse could be actually relocated. And I think we read that in the technical support that was a very expensive option. Am I correct?
Mr. Greening?
I'm sorry, Councillor Oosterhoff, can you just repeat the main?
So in the, yeah, no problem. In the technical report that we received at council, we were, you know, because one of the reasons we're here tonight is that we were discussing, you know, ways of relocating the manse. So that's why we deferred it.
Yes.
And that has proven by professionals in engineering and movers that that's an expensive option, I guess, is it?
It certainly is. I can say that before this ever went to a Heritage Committee, going back to the spring of 2020, we had consulted about the possibility of moving the manse, and we were informed that it was not feasible. And then completely by coincidence, after the Heritage Committee meeting, which I think was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, 2 or 3 days later, a colleague who's associated with Habitat for Humanity approached me to see whether or not Habitat could potentially pick up the building and relocate it. They quickly organized a team of people from Habitat who met on site and spent some time there looking at the building. They also have experience in this region moving buildings in the very recent past. And I was informed by the executive director of the local Habitat that it was not feasible. I believe that there have been other explorations made by perhaps some planning staff around the feasibility of moving it. And I think that they have come to a similar conclusion.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Mayor Patterson, sorry. So, and I accept that. Is it possible that this building would be dismantled in a way that could preserve like stones and you know, some of the unique parts of it for possible reuse? Is that something you could consider in showing respect for the building itself?
Absolutely. I think that the architect that we're working with has a reputation for certainly being interested and involved in heritage projects in the city of Kingston. And I think that any of that building that could be repurposed would be made available to anyone who could make use of that. We would have no issue with that whatsoever. I'd also like to just reiterate that in terms of the manse and the one roof program that sits behind the manse currently is a major impediment to access to the One Roof program. If you visit the site, you will not even know that One Roof sits behind that manse unless you walk through a very narrow entryway at the back of the manse. And so on a go-forward basis, this is going to be problematic when we open up One Roof to have the manse sitting in front of it. So certainly there is some interest in making the One Roof program very accessible and inviting for some of the youth to come in and continue to use the program.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that I see the picture quite clearly now, having read the reports and affirming our decision.
I'll give you that much, but you've had your 2 questions, so I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry, Mayor Patterson.
No, that's okay. Next is Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I did actually, thanks for your presentation. I walked around the manse today and I saw what you're saying, that it is, the work has already started with the One Roof and that there is a small area where they can go between the church and the manse to take a look at the One Roof. But I was wondering when I was looking at it, it's an interesting, like the manse is a beautiful building too. Of course, the church is very architecturally interesting, and staff have mentioned that there are lots of buildings similar to the manse, but further down the road on Princess Street are heritage buildings. So I can imagine that you could perhaps do something interesting with the manse and keep it. But the area at the back is very small. So my question to you is, what efforts have been made to explore architectural kind of designs that could lead to the protection of the manse and keeping the manse?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the first meeting that I attended with our architect, when we looked at the overall concept and what was possible on this property, the first thing that I asked him to do was to try to work at using the manse as the entryway into what would be behind it. I've seen this done in other communities where it has worked well, but I think that in the architect's report that might be included in your package this evening, he does talk about accessibility. So to get into the manse, it's approximately a five steps up into the manse, and the footprint of the main floor of the manse is actually quite small. And to try to repurpose it into an entryway, a waiting room, a reception area that would then be linked to what would be behind it was just not feasible. It was not possible to get ramps in that meet building code that would take you up to that level. We also were very interested in trying to preserve the green space that sits beside the manse and in front of the church as much as is possible into what will become a bit of one of the few green spaces along the Williamsville corridor. So without impinging on that parquet in a major way, it was not possible to get people up to the main level of the manse.
Okay, thank you. And also, what time frame is this? Are you expecting phase 4 to take place? What year, kind of? It'll take years, this project.
Well, at this point, we believe that, in fact, we believe that we'll be able to start construction on phase 2 and phase 3 at record speed. It's our intent to make this project happen at faster than these projects usually take. There's no reason that phase 4 cannot be integrated into that development once it gets rolling. So again, we're starting the planning process right now, and we're exploring how to expedite that in different ways. And there's no reason that phase 4 could not be incorporated into the phase 2 and phase 3 development that we hope to start sooner rather than later.
Next is Councillor Hill.
Thank you. If you were to go back to your sponsors and indicate to them that the manse did not receive approval for demolition, so the project as it's drawn up couldn't go forward until it was redesigned, what would there be an impact from them? Would they be concerned then about the viability of the project?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know what various levels of government would say about the manse remaining. From our point of view, aside from what a funder may say about the project, the manse is just a complete impediment to access to the One Roof program. Additionally, from a technical point of view, site servicing for all utilities need to come in off of Princess Street, we believe. And it's not possible to put them in either under or around the manse. So having the manse remain is going to be a major impediment to the residential construction that's proposed on the site.
My second question, I guess, goes to that. Let's suppose, it doesn't sound very promising, but let's suppose that we could find a way to work around keeping the manse and still maintain the facilities that we wanted. I would assume then that would be at the expense of whatever green space and the parquet would be there if we could do that. Would that be a fair statement?
I believe that it could be a major obstacle to creating the green space the way it's currently designed, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, not seeing any other questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Greening. So with that, we will move ahead. We have no other delegations this evening. Are there any petitions to present? Okay, seeing none. We have no motions of congratulations, recognition, sympathy, condolences, and speedy recovery. And so we will move with that right to deferred motions. We have one deferred motion. It has been moved by Councillor Bohm, seconded by Councillor Kiley. Councillor Bohm is not here. We just ask for somebody else to move it, just to put on the floor. Councillor Holland, thank you. Okay, so it'll be moved by Councillor Holland, seconded by Councillor Kiley. This is the recommendation from the Heritage Kingston Committee that came in the report to our last council meeting. Any discussion? Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I'm hoping that we can have some clarification on timelines, which I know we just heard from Mr. Greening, but as it pertains to the planning process, perhaps CAO Hurdle or if Commissioner Agnew is here, I'm wondering if they could answer how much more time will be needed for this file to come before a planning committee, because we just heard from Mr. Greening that the application has been submitted. And then I think I'll have some follow-ups based on those responses.
Commissioner Agnew.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Patterson. Just trying to turn on my camera here. Great, thank you. So Councillor Kiley is correct. We are just going through the first technical circulation associated with the applications for official plan amendment and rezoning. What we'll be seeing coming forward will be the need to hold a statutory public meeting associated with those applications through planning committee. And typically when we look at working through applications of this nature, we're usually looking at 4 to 6 months of approvals, depending on what types of technical issues come up through the planning review process and also what type of feedback comes up from members of the community. There's also a requirement for site plan approval. Normally, we would look at that sometimes concurrently in terms of reviewing the site plan at the same time as the other planning applications if the applicant submits them that way. If it comes closer to the end of when we're getting close to making recommendations through the zoning and the official plan amendment, that can add time to the end, usually 2 to 3 months for a site plan review. And there could be additional time to that if council made a bump up motion for the approval of the site plan. So it wouldn't reside with me solely as the chief planner of the city, but then it would be vetted through planning committee as well.
Okay, so if I calculate quickly based on your response, 6 months plus 3 months plus maybe 2 months. So we're looking at a year for full planning approval. Is that approximate?
Thank you, and through you, I would think somewhere, yes, between 6 to 9 months, knowing that, there are different associated timelines, as Mr. Greening had indicated, relative to upper level funding of government. So staff are aware that this is a priority project and the timelines are important, but that would represent what would be typically a process that we would undertake for this nature, knowing the technical work that has to be undertaken, the timing of the public meetings, and then factoring in all of that to the development of a detailed recommendation and staff report that would go back through committee to council.
Okay, fair enough. And a follow-up question, which I recognize might not be able to be answered because, as you just said, the application is new to your staff. On the technical side, are there any components of the proposed project that could be built now as of right? And I'll just give the reason I'm asking this. I'm trying to sort out how we can move forward with the project, because I believe that there's the goodwill and consensus of council of its value, while still respecting the planning process, or maybe another avenue that we could explore to make sure that some of the concerns that we heard from individuals like Councillor Neal are addressed, while still seeing it go forward. So I'm just trying to figure out the best path in that way.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, I also have my colleague, Mr. James Barr, on the call tonight with council, and he is the planner that's overseeing the file. So I'm going to defer to James on this question.
Mr. Barr?
Thank you, and through you, your worship. There are a lot of planning approvals that have to go forward for this property, but as mentioned by Mr. Greening earlier on tonight, the One Roof Services building is currently under renovation. It's the old Sunday school wing at the back of the property, and so that work is currently ongoing. Additionally, we could see some renovations to the existing sanctuary church building itself for its interior work, but outside of that, planning approvals are required for the construction of the transitional and supportive housing units. So that would be the 6-story building at the south side of the site, as well as the 2-story youth skills training center that would face onto Princess Street. So those do require both official plan and zoning considerations.
Thank you.
Okay, next on my list is Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say that I had questions last meeting and I voted for the deferral. Although I've read the technical report from the architect, and it seems to me that most of the questions that we were asked were properly answered, and that there's also problems in terms of technically and construction wise with maintaining the heritage value of the church facade if we were trying to maintain if the proponent was trying to maintain the manse. So that, and the church is much more valuable, as we heard from staff last time. And I believe it was an answer to questions even I asked. So, and I was kind of rather impressed by the architect's description of what is possible there in terms of blending heritage and modern architecture and maintaining the parquet, which I believe is important to the councillor of Williamsville and the people that live in the neighborhood. So for those reasons, I'm going to vote for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Ostro.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, and it was good to hear Councillor Hutchison say that. And I am hopeful that Council will approve this recommendation as per the Planning Committee's also positive vote for it. And I really do appreciate the careful look that we have done to this, and yet I am hopeful. I really do see why we're looking at it, and it's a careful look. And but I think that we can also see that the home-based housing has looked at this, and they have some tremendous people working on this project to make it a full and a very complete place, and that unfortunately does call for the removal of this particular building. And so I think we've weighed it really heavily, and I am hopeful that council will see themselves to be able to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Next is Councillor Neal.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier during the delegation, the overall support for this project is very strong in the community, and I support the project as well. The pluses are that it maintains and allows the church, which is a great institution in the community, to continue. It also addresses some real problems that we have with housing and youth services in the city. So I continue to support that. My frustration has to do with I'm not yet convinced that the demolition of a heritage designated building is absolutely necessary. So I have a few questions for staff, whoever can answer these. First of all, I've been told that servicing could be provided off of Albert Street and wouldn't have to come off of Princess Street. Could somebody from staff who's been close to this file answer whether it could indeed be serviced off of Albert Street?
Thank you. And through your worship, I have had discussions with their project team about this specific point the past couple of days, and including today as well. And this is a unique site, which is pretty dynamic in the city, as there are going to be existing buildings on site that need services to run themselves while redevelopment is occurring. So if you remember maybe the earlier phase mapping that had the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 on it, whether from the heritage permit or Mr. Greening's presentation, the one roof building, which is slated as number 1, and then the sanctuary building, which I believe is number 3, will have to continue to run on site. So they'll need water, electrical, gas, while the rest of the site is redeveloped. The current site connections are out to Albert Street underneath Batcher Hall, which is the 2-story building just south of the church. In order for the redevelopment of the site to occur, Batcher Hall has to be demolished and those existing services disconnected in order to build the new building. While this is occurring, site-like services are still needed to those 2 additional buildings, which is why they're proposed to also come from Princess Street. Because if the services are disconnected and no other services brought into the site, then the current buildings would have to close for the remainder of the construction of the site, which may put the one roof services building out of commission on site for a period of up to 6 months. So the servicing connection from Princess Street is being proposed, I believe, to facilitate the current running of the site while redevelopment is happening. We are also in receipt now of their servicing report as part of the complete application for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. And so that report will be reviewed by Utilities Kingston and Engineering. And anecdotally, there are larger services on Princess Street than underneath Albert Street, which would provide greater capacity to the site, given the number of uses that are proposed at this location.
I appreciate, and you mentioned at the beginning that this was information that you received from the developer. I'm curious if Utilities Kingston and our own engineering staff have reviewed that yet, or is that part of the future technical review?
Thank you. And through your worship, the servicing report is currently subject to technical review, which is ongoing right now for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment.
Thank you. I'm a little concerned for some time now, and I mentioned this in an email to staff earlier. We have that when Queens is up and running, that is probably the busiest transit corner in the city, or one of the busiest transit corners. And we have been promising for some time a proper transit updating of that corner. Will this still be able to occur through site plan? I'm a little concerned that we may lose the potential for properly including a transit mini hub at that corner.
Thank you. And through your worship, the applicants have been made aware of the intensity of that transit stop since the beginning of our pre-discussions with them. So they're aware of the requirements from the city's transportation services for increased space for a transit stop at that location. Additionally, the parkette that's proposed at that southwest corner would account for increased space for the transit stop as well. So the heritage approval that's before you tonight that demonstrates the parquet, which is actually in place as well to help display the north side of the church building, which is a designated heritage attribute for the site, will also provide green space to the neighborhood and will provide increased space for a larger transit stop in the future. So there's a lot of significant gains with the current layout of the site and the parquet that's proposed.
Thank you. And if I can ask staff, there's been some reference to other designated properties along Princess Street similar to this property. I know that stretch of Princess Street fairly well. I'm just curious if you can give me the addresses that indeed are similar Edwardian designated properties along Princess Street. Anybody?
So, Councillor New, you're asking for specific addresses?
Yeah, or just reference to, because we've been told there are other similar, therefore Edwardian designated, and I know the designated areas along Princess Street in Williamsville, and I wasn't aware of any. So I'm just asking if anybody can share those with me.
Okay, is there any input from staff on that? CO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I do not have the list, Councillor Neal, with me tonight, but I can commit that we can send that to all members of council tomorrow.
I would appreciate that. I should have asked in advance. I apologize.
Mr. Barr, was there anything else you wanted to add there?
Through your worship, I'm unsure of the comment that there are other Edwardian style dwellings along this section of Princess Street. However, as evaluated in the heritage impact statement by the applicant's consultant, there are several examples of Edwardian style dwellings in the neighborhood to the south on Nelson Street and Albert Street. So maybe there's a bit of a miscommunication there, but in the reporting as well as through the HIS, those are the locations of additional Edwardian style houses that have been identified.
But not specifically on Princess Street, which I think has been alluded to. Thank you. My final comment in question.
Just before you do, I think Commissioner Agnew also wanted to just.
Thank you, Ms. Agnew.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Patterson. Yes, just to help clarify the matter further. I believe Councillor Neal, if I recall at the last meeting of council, Ms. Gummo was speaking to this specifically, and I do recall there being some conversations about some additional examples, but I'm fairly confident the reference was in the surrounding neighborhood as opposed to directly fronting on Princess Street, which would be consistent with what Mr. Barr has indicated relative to the heritage impact assessment that was submitted in support of this application.
I appreciate that, because the reference I think was made that it was on Princess. And as some of the heritage delegates at our last meeting pointed out, they aren't as visible if they're buried on a side street farther away. That the Princess Street location was much more visible location. My final comment, if I can, is that as I mentioned with the delegation, I've received several comments from constituents and neighbors in the immediate area. The concern, and I've expressed this to staff, so I'll say it publicly as well, my concern is that we seem to be going about this process in a rather disjointed way. And the result of that is that the community, the neighborhood, which is supportive, as I am, of the overall project have concerns that decisions are being made that will impact situations in the neighborhood. If this was following the normal planning process, all of this would come before a public meeting at planning, and we'd have an opportunity to talk about parking and transit issues and other issues. And a parkette, I think, is a great idea, but how will that impact our transit needs at that corner? And so I think when we don't have an opportunity for greater
30
community
seconds.
input, thank you, community input, the result is that people start to ask questions that we don't have answers to yet. And what results from that is that people who are supportive of the project start to have issues of trust because we're moving ahead in a kind of disjointed way. And I have serious concerns about that. Thank you.
I did see a couple of other hands. I may not have got everyone's name. So next I see Councillor Stroud. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you know, I was the chair of Heritage for 4 years, and I actually remember some other properties on Princess Street coming to us for designation in that time. So I looked up quickly to try to answer Councillor Neal's question. And I couldn't find any Edwardian examples, but I could find other designated properties nearby within a block or two on Princess Street. One is the Birmingham Carter House, which is Maison Paul Coiffure building. It's not Edwardian, but it's on Princess Street. And then the Carter's Grocery, sorry, the Birmingham 520 Princess Street is where Maison Paul is, and that's the Birmingham Hardy House. And then there's the Carter Grocery at 635, 637 Princess Street, but neither of which is an Edwardian. So I think it's fair to say that Councillor Neal's recollection is partly correct, that we were told there were other designated properties in the area on Princess Street. But from just checking a few nearby examples, the two closest examples are not Edwardian style. So that's that question. As far as the general summary of comments of my colleagues and what I think, one of my Heritage Committee colleagues once said at committee, he said something that I found very useful when you're thinking about heritage designations and demolition. And he said that it is 99% sure of any designated property that it can be repaired rather than not that it can't be saved. And this was a tradesman who worked on, who did the actual work. He was basically saying that it's never impossible. It's usually just a matter of resources, time, and intent. So I think that's what we see here. We see a very good intention with this project. None of that has any heritage relevance. The heritage relevance is, does the house have enough value to us as a city to prevent the application and to prevent demolition? And the heritage permit is required. The heritage process and the consent of council is required for demolition. So that's our question. The question is there enough value here to prevent demolition? And repurposing, of course, renovating and repurposing is always possible. But we heard from Mr. Greening, and I was listening, I was just eating supper at that time, I wasn't on camera, that really, that is a huge undertaking, and it would result in a setup for their program that was problematic. So really, we're weighing a non-heritage priority that we probably all agree on with a heritage priority. So it really is a dilemma. There is no correct answer. There is only a decision to be made. And I would say that moving the manse is probably not the best option. The best option would be repurposing the manse if possible. It is possible, but at what cost? So that's our question tonight. I have a feeling there's enough sentiment in the room that believes that the non-heritage aspect is more important than the heritage aspect. But that's what it will be if we vote that way. It will be basically stating that the non-heritage aspects of this proposal outweigh the heritage aspects. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yeah, I did have similar thoughts to Councillor Stroud on this because I am trying to prioritize the various initiatives that Council has put forward through the strategic plan with, of course, the very important ongoing need to preserve heritage in the city. And what it really comes down to for me is that within the strategic plan, we emphasize the need for affordable housing, of course, and there were lots of initiatives, including the Mayor's Task Force, that took place following or concurrent with the development of those strategic priorities. But also over the last couple of years, the work of the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee has focused on prioritizing areas within housing and homelessness. And over the course of consultation with various groups, programs and services and users of those services, what we came up with needs, the highest needs in the city were for supportive and transitional housing. And the services offered at this site are really, they're such a key part of bringing that part of the work forward that was put forward by Housing and Homelessness as a priority, but also, of course, then falls within our strategic priorities. So because of those two overarching initiatives that really, I think, do capture what we have heard over the course of the last few years as being major priorities and major pressure points in the city, I will be supporting this. I want to see the project go forward, and I feel somewhat comfortable with the trade-off in terms of heritage preservation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I've been to the location and also drove around the neighborhood just to see. I mean, I'm not obviously an architectural expert, or probably wouldn't know the difference between an Edwardian and a Georgian house for that matter. But I think the thing is that my understanding is that there is a lot of inventory of this kind of this style of architecture in the city. So the loss, although it's a loss, is not as significant a loss as, for example, losing the church would be. So I applaud them for the effort to maintain the church. I'm going to sort of speak with my old hat on. For almost 15 years, I was a high school principal in the city. I got to tell you, there was very few days that went by where we weren't dealing with a kid in real crisis. And those kids came from every single one of our neighborhoods. It wasn't that, this is not an issue for a particular neighborhood, not by a long shot, and I know that you folks know that. But it was the greatest gap in our community for all my time in education was the fact that we could not provide services, one-stop services for kids who were at real risk. So we had youth workers trying to take people around to different facilities, to different counselors, to different agencies that would assist them with housing. It was just a nightmare. And every one of those years that I was in high school administration, I wished for something like this because it was so critical to the needs of the community and to the needs of these kids who weren't in just a little bit of crisis. These were kids who didn't have a place to go, didn't have a place to sleep. serious drug and mental health issues, all sorts of concerns, and very varied concerns. And none of them we could address with the resources that we had because they were so distributed or they didn't exist at that time at all. And here we are. We're in a situation where we can put all this together in an amazing facility. I mean, I can't say enough about the good work that's gone into developing this project. And I guess I'm imploring my fellow councillors. You know, Councillor Hutchison said this before about some of the affordable housing that was, being contemplated. And he said, we just have to build it. Let's build it. We can sort out the issues and questions later. This is one of those projects. And I recognize we're going to lose a resource, but I think that on the greater scale, it's not even close. It's not even close to my estimation. This is such an important resource to the community. So I really do implore you to support this motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Osterhoff, would you take the chair?
I will, Mayor Patterson, and I recognize you.
Thank you. I would just echo what Councillor Hill has just shared. I think I'm very much focused on what we're going to gain with a project like this. I appreciate Council's due diligence in taking the time to explore the alternatives of whether the manse could be moved. I think we have the answer from staff about the cost of doing that. So it is a loss, but as has already been stated, I think that the gain far outweighs the loss. I think we all could agree over the last few months that the support of transitional housing, particularly for youth, is an enormous need, probably one of our top priorities. And so being able to see this project go forward is very important. My only question is just again on timing and process. And I've heard Councillor Neal a little bit on this as well. So as I understand the recommendation that's come from Heritage Kingston speaks about the manse not being demolished until a site plan has been approved. And I guess this would be a question of staff. Is there advantage from a process or timeline point of view to make, for example, the demolition conditioned on a heritage easement agreement instead? Is there any case from a staff level that's something that we should look at instead of leaving it contingent until the site plan is approved?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Patterson. So a heritage easement agreement is an opportunity and a tool that exists under the Planning Act that council can use to have some assurances associated with the demolition of the manse of what will go in its place. Council has used this tool in a few other development examples before. And specifically based on some of the information that Mr. Greening has shared with respect to federal timelines associated with being able to demonstrate progress being made on this, also with the development approvals to still come, and what's related to the overall site servicing of this property to allow the first and second stages of the project to be able to continue and function because of the interconnected nature of how the property is currently serviced. And how that is also tied to the location of the manse. I think a heritage easement agreement would be a better and more flexible tool rather than tying it to the site plan approval, which was staff's initial thought and reflected in the recommendation that's before you this evening. But I do think a heritage easement agreement would be an appropriate tool and better in place than the site plan approval in case the manse needs to be demolished in advance of the overall planning approvals being 100% complete for this property.
Okay, thank you for that answer. So I think for two reasons. Number one, there does seem to be some potential issues around timing. Again, if we all want this project to go forward, I want to make sure that we're setting it up for success. And secondly, I think to Councillor Neal's point about how we're tackling this and being able to separate out this issue of the demolition of the manse from the other planning issues and site plan details that we want public feedback on. What I would propose is an amendment to the recommendation in front of us that would simply change the time of the demolition from until a site plan is approved till rather would say until a heritage easement has been agreement has been approved by council. So I'm happy to move that if there's somebody that would second this amendment.
Okay, so can we get that in writing? Can we have a seconder? Sorry, we have Councillor Kiley will second that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I don't really have anything else to add. I think that I've expressed my rationale.
I'll return the chair to you.
It makes sense. No, that's okay. I've amended it, so I think you should keep the chair, but I don't have any further comments at this point.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Patterson. We have a seconder and Councillor Kiley. Do we have any anybody who wants to comment on that? And seeing nobody. Yes, Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have a question to staff, Commissioner Agnew, perhaps. So the Heritage Easement Agreement, is that something that involves the Heritage Committee? I know that sometimes Heritage Easement Agreements are discussed at committee. The Heritage Easement Agreement can also be worked up and agreed to by all parties without it coming to the Heritage Committee. Is that correct?
Commissioner Agnew?
Thank you, and through you, Deputy Mayor. So what we have done on occasions is vet drafted agreements through Heritage Kingston, for information purposes and some feedback, but the decision related to the approval of Heritage easement agreements rests with council specifically. So there's not a regulatory requirement of that to go through committee. We have had some discussions at committee in the past with respect to specific agreements, but the final approval rests with council.
Okay, so logical follow-up question then would be again to Commissioner Agnew. Would it make sense, is the Heritage Easement Agreement that would be required here, and we're talking about a demolition, so usually I'm thinking it's probably documentation of photo documentation and things like that of the demolished property before and things like that. What details are necessary that you could think of for this site, and what is there any value in involving the expertise of the Heritage Committee on the agreement?
Commissioner Agnew?
Thank you, and through you. Certainly, we could look at definitely documentation of the property. That would be something standard that we would be looking at as part of demolition anyway. What the Heritage Easement Agreement is able to provide, in addition to what was already approved through Heritage Kingston, which is what's before you this evening, is that it allows us to establish a legal agreement that's registered against the title of the property, so it stays with the property, but it also allows us to deposit drawings associated with that. So the drawings that have been submitted through the planning process but haven't yet been fully vetted through that process, we can attach to the Heritage Easement Agreement as a sense of assurance of what's to go in place on the property, specifically with respect to the manse removal. So there is that assurance in place that especially if it's happening in advance of the overall planning process, that there is some assurance and there's a legal agreement that's registered against the title of the property. Outside of any other details, there's a lot of conditions that are associated with the permit that's before you tonight that we could make sure are translated into the Heritage Easement Agreement. I'm not sure if there's any other specific things that are coming to mind right now that the committee may want to comment on outside of what they've already provided in relationship to the demolition request that's before you tonight and the conditions that are listed.
Right. So on the question of whether the expertise of the Heritage Committee might be useful in the drawing up of a heritage agreement, I'm hearing not necessarily. So then the question becomes, what is the value of the Heritage Easement Agreement itself? We know that it would be a different trigger for the demolition than what is already in the staff recommendation, but what heritage value is there in the Heritage Easement Agreement that isn't already there?
Commissioner Agnew?
Yeah, thank you, and through you. So that's a good question. What you have before you tonight is a permission from council relative to the demolition. Like I said, what this enables council to do is to enter into an agreement that is a legal agreement that would be between home-based housing and the city of Kingston. And it also registers what the intent of the property is, so that there's comfort that there is a commitment to follow through with the full building of the property, because that hasn't been fully vetted yet through the public planning process. So to me, it provides a level of assurance. In terms of heritage easement agreements, I can't really comment what the city did in previous years before I worked on some of these matters. I think in every circumstance I can think of, we have vetted a draft through Heritage Kingston to get their feedback on it. So we're happy to do that as part of the process. And there could be some items that perhaps I'm not thinking about tonight that the Heritage Committee may want to contribute. And I think it's a legislative piece anyway, that we want to make sure that that is vetted through them, and that council also has the benefit of knowing that the committee has looked at it before you agree to a legally binding agreement. But it would be very similar to what you're seeing tonight in the conditions, with an added level of additional legal agreement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess, my thought would then be, having heard the commissioner's last response, that the only downside to asking for input from the expert members of the Heritage Committee would be further delays that come up from that. So anticipating that concern, what can the commissioner tell us about the timelines? Should staff consult the Heritage Committee on the Heritage Agreement? Does this create a delay, I guess is the question, sorry.
Commissioner Agnew?
I think in terms of logistics and trying to get this back before council in a timely manner, we'd be hustling quite quickly to pull this together to be able to try to vet that before Heritage Kingston. I believe there's a meeting in December that we'd be aiming to hit, because otherwise the November meeting is tomorrow. So there would be a time turnaround for staff on that, but that's not unusual for us on certain things. And because we've already thoroughly vetted this issue through Heritage Kingston, it's not like we're starting from scratch. So I think it's a matter of working with our legal team to draft an agreement into the appropriate format, which would have the content. So our goal would be to bring this before Heritage Kingston in December. That may delay us from bringing it back to council until January. I don't have the council schedule before me. It would just be the matter of how the meetings fall in the month of December with what's available in the council calendar. So it may then need to come to council for approval in early January to have the Heritage Kingston consultation in December, and then proceed to the next meeting of council, which could be in December or it could be in early January. It's usually the third week of December. Of the month for Heritage Kingston. I don't know if the clerk is able to confirm what the meeting schedule is for Heritage Kingston relative to council meetings that preceded before the end of 2020.
Is there somebody, Mr. Clerk, can confirm the date of Heritage meeting? I don't see it on my calendar. I'm on Heritage.
Through your worship, the commissioner is right. It is the third week in December. What I can say is we have a calendar with respect to the 2020 meetings that is going forward at the next council meeting. And then the first council meeting in January would be the second Tuesday of the month.
Thank you.
So you can see the question, what I'm proposing, I guess, or mulling over, is whether we should make an amendment to the mayor's amendment to have the Heritage Agreement go to the Heritage Committee for recommendations. It wouldn't be in their hands to approve or deny. It would just be for recommendations on the content of the Heritage Agreement. So we've heard from Commissioner Agnew that it would then, timeline-wise, would be the December meeting of the Heritage and the January meeting of Council. So I guess I would like to make that amendment. Mr. Deputy Mayor, I may need the clerk's assistance for the wording, but essentially it is that the Heritage Agreement, that staff consult the Heritage Committee prior to seeking approval of the Heritage Easement by council.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, do we have that? So just to be clear, Councillor Estrada, are we just wanting to clarify the dates then? Is that correct on the amendment?
Well, the way that I said it, it doesn't need to specify dates because it's just whenever the staff report was going to come to council, the recommendation was come to council, it would need to have been already.
Into Heritage first.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Neal is seconding that. Okay, thank you. So any discussion then on the amendment to the amendment? Any discussions? One, Councillor Kiley. Go ahead, Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Rothman, through you. I'm concerned, well, let me say first, while I appreciate the need to utilize our committees when and where appropriate, I'm concerned that doing this actually puts us into the bind that the initial motion did, which Mayor Patterson's amendment tried to get us out of.
Just wait till Kylie's done and then interrupt.
So I haven't made up my mind, but I'm just pointing that out, that I see that this kind of brings us full circle, which is unfortunate. Though obviously that would not be intention, or at least I don't think it would be, of Councillor Stroud.
Yes, one moment, please. We have Clerk Janet James. Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you, if I could request a short recess, maybe of about 5 minutes, to give the mover a chance to put the motion in writing as required by the bylaw and send it to the clerk.
Yes, we'll take 5 minutes and we will come back at, I see here, bear with me, at 8:17. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Deputy Mayor Osterhoff, it is 8:18 now. We have the motion. We can resume at your will.
There you go. Okay, sorry, I was muted there. So thank you for that. And we'll return here. So Councillor Stroud, I have been informed that your amendment is not required. It will go before Heritage. That is required as per the clerk's instructions. Okay. It's not required. It will happen. Yes. All right. Are there any more anybody else want to speak to the amendment, the original amendment of Mayor Patterson? Seeing, yes, Councillor Doherty. Go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Deputy Mayor. Just want to, before we vote here, just want to clarify whether there will be, if we support this, will there be any negative impacts to the proposal?
Okay, who can speak to that? Commissioner Agnew or Mr. Barr?
Thank you, and through you, Deputy Mayor. So we have had an opportunity to quickly discuss with the applicant that we may need to utilize this tool as opposed to a condition related to site plan approval. And I'm confident that we can work with them and provide what's needed relative to their funding timeline that Mr. Greening spoke to, and still satisfy all the conditions that Heritage Kingston has put forward to council, and that council is considering approving as part of this amended motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, anyone else? Councillor Neal.
Thank you. I'm happy to support this initiative. I know I'm a bit of a policy wonk, and I know that I've been frustrated with the process of doing things prior to the usual planning process. But I think this amendment addresses that issue, and so I will be supporting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else? Councillor Chappelle, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. I would just like you to be able to repeat the amendment before we vote on it, because there's been such a lag. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we have here that the deferred motion of Councillor Holland and Councillor Cotty be amended in the second paragraph, bullet 3, to read as follows: that the manse not be demolished until such time as a heritage easement agreement has been approved by council and registered on the title of lands. Okay. And if we're all good and seeing no more, all in favor of supporting this amendment? And any opposed? And I see none. And okay, thank you very much. It passes. The amendment passes. Councillor Mayor Patterson, I return the chair to you. Is there?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Okay, so with that, we're back then to the staff recommendation, or the recommendation from Heritage Kingston as amended. Is there any further discussion? Anybody that wishes to speak that has not already spoken? Okay, with that, then we will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, with that, we will move to reports. First up, we have report number 91 from the CAO.
Moved by Councillor Hill, seconded by Councillor Chappelle, that report number 91 from the Chief Administrative Officer recommend be received and adopted clause by clause.
Okay, so the first clause, temporary pickup and delivery parking in paid parking areas and extension of use of sidewalk for patios. Councillor Neal.
Thank you. I support this initiative. I know I've been in conversation with staff about the fact that there's a need outside of the BIA area to provide the same level of service. Along Princess Street through the Williamsville corridor, there are issues with small businesses being affected by, particularly in construction zones, with people parking and taking up any possible customer parking spaces. And so I look forward to this initiative, which works well in the BIA area, to also apply for farther up on Princess Street. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a few questions about this, which I basically support. In the report, it says, I'm going to quote it here. What will, quote, work with business owners to address issues of snow clearing and accessibility involved? And I'm concerned about that from calls I've got on weekends and Sundays, and when we have big storms or ice storms or something like that, I'll get calls from business owners about businesses that have not cleared the walk in front of their business and have not opened up for that day or a couple of days. And that makes it difficult for businesses and customers and residents to get around. And so the businesses in particular get a bit vexed about this. So I'm just wondering how we're going to take care of that.
Okay. Mr. Falwell, go ahead.
Thank you, and through your worship, and to answer the councillor's question, we will be working very closely with Public Works and doing as many inspections as possible. Certainly, we want to inspect the interested parties' patios and make some recommendations to the business operators to make sure that they are doing their part from a snow removal perspective. And it will take some reminders to ensure that they are providing that accessible sidewalk in front of their storefront. So I know in the past we have provided some warnings to some business operators, and we will continue to do that and work with our enforcement team as necessary if it does come to that from a fines perspective. But we hope to work with our partners to ensure that it is a safe spot to traverse within the sidewalk space.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to put that, unfortunately, on your stovetop there, because it does come up on occasion. And but other than that, I'm very supportive of this. I'm going to ask this question, although I think I know the answer. It's been put to me. Is it possible to remove the Jersey barriers before the end of November? My understanding is they're to be gone by the end of November. Is that correct?
No, that's not, through your worship, no, that's not correct. We've communicated that the Jersey barriers and the existing lay-by spaces will be open and available until November 30th. And the removal will start that first week of December. There's currently some of the decals are being removed, and prior to the ability to remove the actual barriers themselves, that work needs to take place. And there are still, although a few businesses still utilizing the space. So it is coordinated to happen the first week of December.
Okay, so, but within, generally speaking, the Jersey barriers will be gone by the end of the first week of December. Is that what I understand?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I think we're talking about the same thing, but thank you for that clarification. Okay. Thank you. I urge council to support this. It'll help businesses, and I think staff are ready to make it work. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Chappelle.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. My question is more with response when we had the downtown opening and extending patios in the downtown core, which I think was very beneficial to the businesses to help them sustain business and work through our pandemic. There was neglect with regards to consideration of West End pubs and restaurants, and I'm just wondering, for clarity purposes, if there's a West End pub, like the Royal Oarsman or something like that, wishes to have a patio in the wintertime, are they precluded from this proposal, or will they be included? And if they are excluded, can we ensure that such businesses that wish to have a patio in the West End, or even the East End for Councillor Bone's sake, who's not here tonight, if they could be included as well?
Thank you, and through your worship, through the process, we have been supportive of all requests, and whether on private land or City of Kingston owned land, and it just follows a slightly different process in coordination with our building department and planning department to review. We encourage those business operators to connect with their landlord to ensure, or if they are the owner, to ensure that they have the space to do so and coordinate the snow removal as necessary. And if there are further questions, we have a generic email, patios@cityofkingston.ca, that we'd be happy to further discuss with those operators in order to facilitate their needs on their lands as well.
Thank you, Mr. Falwell. I think this is an excellent initiative. It certainly has my support. Thank you.
And next is Councillor Hill.
Thank you. This is just really a question for clarification. The Jersey barriers are coming down at the end of November. So I'm assuming that this will only apply to those restaurants that have sidewalk space. The Jersey barriers will all be gone at the end of November. Is that correct?
Through your worship, the Jersey barriers will be removed starting the 1st of December. So by the end of the first week of December, the patio season has been extended officially until November 30th. So we will start the removal. But what we're asking for tonight is the ability to utilize sidewalk space only. So you are correct that a number of our permanent patios are and have been located on the sidewalk. But we also recognize that we have a number of operators that have not had a permanent patio on a sidewalk, and the recommendation tonight allows staff to try and work with those operators to achieve a sidewalk opportunity if it exists. So we will review those on a case-by-case basis and try and facilitate those requests where possible.
I'm really happy to see this happen too, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, through you. Mr. Falwell, the report didn't mention anything about materials being used for outdoor patios in the winter. I'm wondering if there's any comment from staff about that, just incorporating some of the feedback at least I got, and I think other colleagues from the first iteration of the LMK, or LKM, Love Kingston Marketplace, was about aesthetics. I'm wondering if there's going to be any guidance about what these outdoor patios could look like.
Thank you, and through your worship, our sidewalk bylaw does have some design considerations and elements to it. We were trying to be as flexible as possible as it was a changing situation in terms of the needs and wants of the operators. And it's our expectation that majority of the businesses that will be interested and have shown interest in this are our permanent patio operators. So they have met and gone through the rigorous process of approval. It's the few that we anticipate will come in the coming weeks that we'll need to continue to work with. And we will use those design guidelines to help us through that process. But there are also very specific requirements that we need to work through our building department if they're going to be enclosed in any way and heated. So we will try to facilitate the review and the aesthetics component as much as possible and make recommendations to the operators. But I wouldn't say we have the ability, and certainly some of the operators don't have the time to fabricate and have, you know, the level of aesthetic that we would be hoping for in the long term in such a short period of time.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I support it, and hopefully folks will be able to take advantage of it. Thanks.
Okay, so we will, yeah, Councillor Stroud. Go ahead. Councillor Stroud, you have the floor.
Yes, sorry, the hospital called me right at that time. I just have a question to staff about one specific element of this proposal and what's in the report. So obviously, there's many aspects to it, but the one aspect that got my attention was the designation of these as free 10-minute parking zones, and the intention for pickup and delivery, and that cars wouldn't stay very long, and that many different users could use the same space over and over, as is the case with, say, pedestrians at a walk-up window or a drive-through. If you're in a car, there's a constant revolving door element to those spaces, and it makes those spaces efficient. But my question is, what happens if people just park in them because it's free parking? So what is staff's, I'm sure you've looked at this, what is staff's take on what enforcement would be required, and what might, if we got a lot of people parking there past the 10-minute point and just using it as available parking, because parking is limited in the downtown, we hear that a million times. What is staff's plan for that?
Through you, your worship. We would be enforcing these in the same way that we currently enforce the commercial loading zones that allow for after 2 p.m. They allow parking for 10 minutes. So the enforcement practices would be the same. That's why we need to put the signage up, because that's a requirement for us to be able to enforce. The report does speak to allowing the officers to use some discretion and to help to educate people as well, because we don't want to just come down with a very hard enforcement approach on it. But certainly if we did see that there was a situation where a vehicle was parked much longer than 10 minutes, then we would be issuing a parking infraction for it.
Thank you. So I flagged this concern. I just know from being a downtown resident that that is a constant pressure on available parking, especially when it's designated as free. Even if there's a time limit on it, people tend to try to bend the rules, hoping that there's no one around or that they haven't been keeping track of how long the vehicle has been there. So what is the method used in these loading zones to do enforcement staff take a photo, or do they mark the vehicle? How do they know, how do they keep track of how long the vehicle has been in the spot?
Mr. Kidd?
Through you, your worship, there are a couple of different methods that they can use. They do take photos. They will record a plate. I think it might be important to clarify for council that the report isn't suggesting that we just move to implement additional 10-minute free spaces. What the report is seeking is council approval to do so if it becomes necessary. So at this point, and with the way the system is operating, and with the occupancy levels that we're seeing with on-street spaces, we feel that the supply is adequate. And once the Jersey barriers are removed and our spaces are returned that have been out of commission over the course of the summer, we certainly feel that that's going to be adequate space. This is in preparation for what might come in light of COVID, and if changes are required and there's more pickup and delivery type of activity that needs to happen. So we're not planning to implement these unless we absolutely have to, because to the councillor's point, they are difficult to monitor when you have free spaces. But we would monitor them in much the same way that we monitor cars that park free at parks and cars that park free in the afternoon in the loading zones. That's
a perfect segue, Commissioner, to my closing comment, because I I am, and the Sydenham residents are very grateful for the crackdown on the abuse of City Park for free parking, which is no longer the case because staff made that impossible, and we are very grateful for that. But it's a similar kind of situation, basically. If parking is available and there is no requirement to pay, folks will use it for indeterminate periods of time. And if that becomes a problem, of course, staff can deal with that time. I guess it's on all of the downtown businesses and folks living in the downtown to sort of keep an eye on that kind of thing, because we wouldn't want to have that kind of city parking, all day parking in free spots to the detriment of park users. We wouldn't want that happening on our downtown streets, so that, with free parking or affecting our paid parking supply either. So I think I've made my concerns noted, and I will be supporting this initiative. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will call the vote on clause 1. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Clause 2, Community Park Partnership Amendment, Francophone Secondary School. Councillor Chappelle.
J'adore la culture francophone, francophonie, c'est très important pour la femme et moi. Mes enfants en français très bien. This is a very important project for the Francophone community of Kingston, and I certainly encourage my colleagues to support this. This is a joint park as well with the city, and so in trying times and increasing the size of this joint Francophone public and Francophone Catholic school with this park and included with the city, I think is an excellent project. And I had to actually recuse myself from the vote on planning on this a couple of years ago because my boys were still attending the school, but I'm happy to support it tonight. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Conseiller Chappelle. Je suis très impressionné par votre français. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Okay, we will call the vote on clause 2. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Clause 3, update on council priorities, motions, and petitions. Okay, all those, Councillor Hutchison. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Mayor, I welcome this report. I just have a couple of questions. And one of them is regarding the downtown market at Springer Market Square. There are local grown food suppliers at the downtown market and from out of town food suppliers as well. What are the implications of this initiative for each of these suppliers? Or have we got that far?
CEO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you, Councillor Hutchison, for your question. We haven't gotten that far yet. This is strictly a direction from council to ask us to look at the current bylaw and see if there are ways that we could increase the amount of local food. So as you pointed out, our public market downtown is quite different from our market at Memorial Center, where it's all local food. Our public market isn't. And what we would like to do is work with our partners, including the Vendors Association, to see how we could introduce ways into our bylaw to increase access to local food. That's part of the food security initiative that we would like to move forward. So this would strictly give us a direction to look into it and report back to council.
Thank you. I'm just flagging this, of course, because it has been a point of serious controversy in the past. I don't want to stir the pot because it's no fun, but I think it's important the council knows that it may come back to us at some point. and no fault of staff. I have another question. Perhaps Ms. Hurdle can answer that as well. There's reference to forming a food hub with collaborating food supplier organizations, most of them not-for-profits, I suppose. So I'm just wondering if you have a concept, like a concept of what that would entail.
Seo Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So the food hub is something that was raised actually through the social services recovery team, which is looking at a number of initiatives to help our most vulnerable in the community. It is an initiative that would essentially provide the space that would be required for proper coordination and distribution of multiple food programs, all within a shared space. So we would be working with those partners to try to identify what could be appropriate in the community and how the city can support that. And we would report that back to council.
Okay, so that what would be really new about that is the shared space aspect, I presume.
That's correct, Councillor.
Okay, but I presume that hasn't been identified as yet.
That's correct. This is the direction to have staff work on this particular initiative and report back to council in terms of how the city can support this.
Perhaps I shouldn't let staff off the hook quite so easily, but it's tempting, I guess. So thank you. Those were my questions. And I'll support this, of course.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Worship. The progress on the shelter review is, I note that the completion date, I think, is June 2021. And I'm curious about whether tonight we will be changing the composition of the committee that's involved in that, potentially. So just curious about when work is commencing and whether there is, I know that there will be considerable public engagement involved in that. So, and also it's obviously sort of an emergent and kind of priority situation, pandemic or not, I guess. So yeah, just any updates on how that work will commence and whether, I think what I'm most concerned with is that the Housing and Homelessness Committee meets quarterly. So whether there needs to be a new timeline and a new sort of structure for those meetings to get that work done prior to June.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you, Councillor Holland, for this question. The work has actually commenced. City staff has already started to do quite a lot of research in terms of best practices and pulling together that information. As far as the committee structure or frequency of meetings, I think what we have the ability to do is call special meetings, which we would probably recommend that we do for this particular topic. I think it's going to be quite important and will require a lot of time of the committee to focus on. So we would probably look at calling a special meeting for that and really focusing on this particular aspect. We know that there will be some public engagement that's required, and we anticipate that's going to happen fairly early in the new year.
Thanks.
Okay, next is Councillor Stroud. Councillor Stroud, did I see your hand or did I use somebody else?
Thanks, Your Worship. No, I was wiping my eye like this.
Okay, no, thank you. Okay, next is Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So when staff will be reviewing and streamlining the process for the farmers market and work with Tourism Kingston to support the food to table initiative, will you also be reaching out to local farm groups like Community Harvest Kingston and Loving Spoonful? Like, how will you be including the community?
Seo Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Dorothy. Absolutely, we are going to be reaching out to these community groups as well. They do very important work in the community. I have actually already started to look at setting up a conversation with them, assuming that council would be supportive of this direction to review the current bylaw to look at ways to incorporate more local foods into our public market downtown. So they will absolutely be engaged.
Excellent. Thanks.
Okay, so with that, we will call the vote on clause 3. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, on to clause 4, a bylaw to provide rules for governing the order and procedures of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, and to repeal bylaw number 2010-1, Council Procedural Bylaw as amended in its entirety, and corresponding amendment to committee bylaw number 2010-205. Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have just a couple points of clarification with regards to the delegations on section 12.16. I'm just wondering if we could have delegations speak to municipal matters of that jurisdiction, not just speak to anything. And second question I have is, this is a comprehensive document, so I'm curious why it didn't go to the Policy Admin Committee for consideration before it came to Council. And then on page 134 of 308, the clauses for loss of deferred motions committee, I just like to bring that to the attention of council. I'm not comfortable with having a deferred motion at policy admin being bumped up to the all of council to consider if it wasn't ready for prime time at public admin, at policy admin. So if I could have the clerk just address some of those concerns for me, that'd be great. Oh, and why aren't we using Robert's Rules of Order and we're still using the bourgeois, the other form? Anyways, no more questions.
Mr. Clerk.
So through you, Your Worship, to the councillor, I'll start from your last questions and go forward from there. We use Bornos as traditional within Kingston. Roberts is also used by other municipalities, but it's not as comprehensive as Borno. So that's why we've continued to use Borno. The examples within the Borno document have worked well for us in the past. With respect to why the report did not go to Administrative Policies Committee, the Administrative Policies Committee, within its mandate, does not provide for the review of the procedural bylaw. That's not to say that council can't direct the procedural bylaw be reviewed by the Administrative Policies or any other committee per se. Traditionally, that is not done by policy committees, as I mentioned before. So this is not policy, this is a bylaw. Could you go back to those first 2 points? I seem to have just misplaced them as we speak.
Well, just for clarification, the way this item gets voted on, I'm okay with a lot of the new content, but my only question was regarding page 134, the bylaw, to define basically clauses lost or deferred at committee, and wanting to kick that up to council for a decision. I'm not comfortable with that, and I was wondering if you can clarify if voting on this particular section now includes that component of the vote.
Through your worship to the councillor, the lost clauses are not something new. It's traditional within the city of Kingston. We always do that, whether it's at a standing committee, a heritage committee or whatnot. So that's not new. With respect to the deferrals being bumped up to council, our look at that is the fact that council really makes the final decisions with respect to that which is being undertaken by the standing committees. What could happen, and what has happened in the past, is that a number of items get stuck at the standing committee level and never make it up to council. So as I said before, council is the one that really directs staff on what it is that they're doing. So some of the work that's being requested from some of the standing committees could turn out to be substantive, and that could take us away from our work plan. So that's why it's important in our mind for it to go up to council. And it can always be shut back down to the committee, but it allows council to maintain control over business.
So for example, the short-term rentals program that's been kicking around the Policy Amendment Committee for over a year, it would be forced up to council for a vote rather than hang out in limbo for the Policy Amendment Committee. Is that what you're saying?
Through your worship to the councillor, that is what I'm saying. However, this action would take place following the approval of the bylaw. So those things from the past, they still need to work the way back up to council. But on a go-forward basis, you are correct. Similar items would have to go up to council. The thing to remember is that the standing committees meet bi-monthly, so it's not really going to slow things down. What it'll do is it'll provide clarity as well as oversight that the council is responsible for.
Okay, and then my final comment was with regards to delegations, since we are a creature of the province and we fall under the Municipal Act, under Section 1216, delegations to speak to the municipal matters of jurisdiction. I'm wondering if it's possible to amend that, delegations come to speak to municipal matters only.
Through your worship to the councillor, that is correct. That is the approach that we're taking on a go-forward basis. Council should really focus on things within their jurisdiction and not things outside, but better suited at the federal or provincial level.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next on my list is Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When a bylaw like this comes forward, I'm reminded that we're passing this bylaw not only for ourselves, but for councils and councillors to come. And though I recognize that most of these are administrative details, I'm not altogether comfortable with certain aspects, in particular those connected with electronic meetings and the location of council meetings and how they originate relative to the electronic electronic meetings. So to me, this format of meeting that we have today is not to be compared in terms of openness and transparency to an actual physical meeting of council, where the public knows where we are the vast majority of the time. They know they can come down, they can see us, they can appraise the whole situation, as can we, because I think we all know there are certain advantages to meeting. And I'm going back to when we were talking about whether we were going to go back or not. I think this was July, August, and a number of councillors said, I'd really like to go back. But COVID had other ideas. So I've got a motion to defer because I think this needs to be looked at more carefully, among other concerns, such as some of the ones that Councillor Chappelle raised at the Administration Policies Committee, which, as the clerk said, we can refer it to there. So if the clerk could bring up the motion to defer that I sent in earlier, please. And do you want to read it, Mr. Mayor, or shall I?
I'm happy to read it. It's moved by seconded by Councillor Neal that Report 91, Clause 4, received from the CAO be deferred to the Administrative Policies Committee for review and to make recommendations to the Council, particularly but not exclusively, regarding the provisions regarding electronic meetings and the provision determining the location of council meetings. So, Councillor Hutchison, you have the floor if you wish to speak further to the amendment or to the motion to defer. Rather.
I didn't put an aspect about timing there that could be added. I was thinking that the Administrative Policies Committee would probably deal with that properly. As I just wanted to make the point that an in-person physical meeting allows for more open and transparent government, It allows the people to know where we're meeting. It makes decision-making more available and accessible, which is key to democracy and the democratic process. And I don't think that it also allows for certain sociality that's involved with that. And I think since we haven't dealt with this before, I tell myself having to invent or create concepts to describe what goes on here as versus what goes on in a physical meeting. And I think those are things we need to consider more seriously. So those are my reasons for moving a deferral to the Administrative Policies Committee. Thank you.
Okay, so motion to defer is on the floor. So debate with respect to time, place, or direction. Time, place, or direction. Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is with regards to direction. I'm looking at the names coming ahead on the members of the Policy Administrative Committee, and I'm curious if the mover, Councillor Hutchison, will be looking to join that committee as we can use filling that councillor spot.
So we'll take that as that's not with respect
to direction.
Direction. It was a good attempt, but noted. Thank you. Councillor Hill.
I guess I'm just wondering in terms of time, is there an urgency to getting this passed? I'm thinking more that there could be a greater opportunity, I guess, either through the policy committee or otherwise, for us to have a bit more input into this generally after having a couple of years on council, sort of seeing how things work. So is there an urgency to get this passed?
Mr. Clerk.
To you, Mayor Patterson, to the councillor, there isn't an urgency per se with respect to bringing this forward, but the bylaw that we're dealing with was passed in 2010 and has gone through a lot of morphs in terms of 11 additional amendments. When we talk about the issues dealing with electronic meetings as well as meeting locations, what I can say is that the concept of electronic meetings was incorporated in the current procedural bylaw in March 2020. This was in place of what we're having during the declared state of emergency. So prior to the Municipal Emergency Act, municipalities were permitted to include electronic participation as a component of the procedural bylaw, but members participating electronically were not counted towards the quorum. So what happened later on is the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act was enacted in July 2020, which further amended the Municipal Act to permit electronic meetings outside of declared state of emergency, which we're currently under. So the proposed bylaw amendments incorporates these new provisions from the new legislation, and that's why we're continuing these electronic meetings here. With respect to where the meetings are being held, once again, this is really administrative in nature. We've incorporated some language into the proposed procedural bylaw to allow for these meetings to be held at such places as specified in the agenda. What it does is it allows us not to have to pass a motion every time we want to move the meeting out of the council chamber to whatever location we want to deal with. So realistically, the issues dealing with the electronic meetings as well as the locations are really housekeeping in nature. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Strauch.
Can we get the deferral motion up again? I just wanted to take a look before I speak. I'm speaking to direction. Make recommendation to council, particularly but not exclusive regarding. Okay, so recommendation can be about anything. Examples. Okay, so what I was going to say about direction was one of the crucial reasons for moving this to committee for discussion is not only so that the committee members can weigh in on how this should look, but also to hear from members of the public. We are here to represent the public. We haven't heard from the public on this. So if we vote on it tonight, public won't have a chance to weigh in. So therefore, the direction it's not explicitly stated in the deferral motion, but I think maybe it ought to. So I would be wondering if Councillor Hutchison would consider a friendly amendment to add and for public input or something like that for the deferral motion. Make that also explicit to hear from the public or to gather public input. That's a question to the mover.
Councillor Hutchison, is that a friendly amendment?
Okay, I took it for granted that if it was an open administration process.
I think it's redundant, Councillor Stroud. I mean, meetings.
But I'm fine. Of course, I'm fine with it. I mean, the purpose of doing this.
Yeah, I don't think that the amendment is explicitly needed. Does staff have any comment on that? Mr. Clerk?
To your worship, to the councillor, no, an amendment is not required. What I would like to point out, though, is that staff followed the notice provisions of our policy. We did provide 14 days notice on our website. We did not have anybody register to speak to this matter, although anybody was free to speak to it by filling out the delegation form.
Okay, Councillor Stroud, anything else?
Well, you know, I'm only going to speak to direction, time, or place, and that was my point about direction.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. When it comes to direction, I'm just wondering if I could also get some clarification from the mover of this amendment, whether the recommendations, will the recommendation include what we are seeing in front of us today with the recommended changes, so that we can differentiate between what is recommended by the committee and what we have in front of us today?
So I think Councillor Doherty, I don't think that that's something that, you know, Councillor Hutchison can really even specify. Ultimately, if council defers this to the committee, then it is in the committee's hands to amend. And then when it comes back to council, then obviously there'll be an opportunity for council to discuss anything that's changed, because we'll still have, of course, the original version from staff that we have before us tonight.
That makes sense. Yeah, thanks.
Deputy Mayor, would you take the chair?
And I recognize you. I will.
So just a question on timing for staff. When is the next Administrative Policies Committee meeting scheduled? When would this be discussed?
To you, Mr. Mayor, the next Administrative Policies Committee meeting is scheduled for December 10th. I suspect that this would probably go to either that meeting or a meeting in the first quarter of 2021.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
So I realize that we haven't yet officially approved the meeting schedule for 2021, but could I ask staff, given the draft of what is expected forward, when would we expect the second meeting in January to be scheduled for?
To your worship, are we talking about the second meeting of council in January?
Yes.
It would be the 15th of January. Proposed at this point.
The second council meeting in January would be the 15th?
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. We're looking at the 22nd of January because we'll be starting, we believe.
Okay.
I'm sorry, just a moment, please.
3rd.
Through Mr. Mayor, without looking at the calendar and draft directly, it would be the 12th, the 19th, or the 26th. So it would be the second, third, or fourth Tuesday. We have a budget cycle that's also included in January.
Okay, okay, thank you. So I would like to propose an amendment to the motion to defer that would simply add at the end the motion to defer the voting, and that the Administrative Policies Committee report back to council by the second council meeting in January 2021.
Sir, sorry, Mayor Patterson, I lost my video there for a moment. I just reconnected. I'm good now. I'll try to catch up here.
So, do I still have the floor? I'm sorry.
I'm back on. I apologize. I completely lost 2 minutes gone there.
No, that's okay. I just, because I happen to be in council chambers with the clerk has just mentioned to me that there is no Administrative Policies Committee scheduled for January.
Okay.
So really, I think if with your permission, I would just change that motion to amend to say that the Administrative Policies Committee report back to council no later than our second council meeting in February. If
okay. Yes. Is there any more discussion? Are we clear on that? And are we any more discussion? I'm going to try to get everybody on the screen here for myself. There we go. Any comments? Yes, Mayor Patterson.
I'm not sure if anyone's willing to second my amendment.
Oh, yeah. Is anybody willing to second? Councillor Hutchison is seconding it. Any further comments? Okay. Yes, Councillor Stroud.
Just briefly, so there is an administrative policies meeting in December where this, I think it's the 10th of December, would very likely be on the agenda. I believe that's what staff said, therefore giving us more than a month from that time, or giving staff more than a month from that time from when it's discussed at committee to bring it to council in February. So I think it gives us ample time on the question of timing.
Okay. So are you saying, Councillor Stroud, that you think there will be time by December 10th or not?
I'm saying that it gives us ample time because it there's December and then January, and if for some reason the committee needs more time in December, they actually have another meeting in February as well, which is what the mayor's timing is.
Yes. Okay. Seeing no, yes, Councillor Hill.
I guess it's around time. My issue would be if it went to admin policy and the admin policy decided for a more comprehensive review, that obviously that work couldn't get done in time for that meeting. So would it just come to council then, and council would be looking to approve a more comprehensive review if that was the decision of admin policies? I guess that's my questions to the mayor.
To the mayor, yes, Mayor Patterson.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. So the intent of this amendment is not to rush the process, but it would be essentially to require the Administrative Policies Committee to report back to council with either recommendations, or if there's a decision to go in a different direction, that it gives all of council a chance to approve what that next step should be.
Okay. So seeing no more, can we vote on the amendments, right? That's what we want. All in favor of this amendment? We count 1, 2, 3. Can I see if you keep your hands up? I'm sorry. Yes, then we have unanimous. Okay, thank you. That passes. I pass the chair back to you, Mayor Hutchison.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. So now we're back to a motion to defer as amended. So any further discussion on time, place, or direction? Okay, seeing none, then we will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, moving on to report number 82 from, or 92 rather, from Planning Committee.
Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Kiley, that report number 92 from the Planning Committee be received and adopted.
Okay, so there are several clauses here in report number 92. Would anyone like them separated? If not, then we will vote on them as a whole. So clause 1, approval of zoning bylaw amendment 262 Wellington Street. Clause 2, approval of zoning bylaw amendment 1024 Portsmouth Avenue. Clause 3, approval of final plan of condominium 652 to 670 Princess Street and 551 Victoria Street. And clause 4, approval of final plan of condominium 673 Innovation Drive. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Report number 93 from the Kingston Environmental Advisory Forum.
Moved by Councillor Doherty, seconded by Councillor Neal, that report number 93 from the Kingston Environmental Advisory Forum be received and adopted.
There's just the one clause, Kingston's Community Climate Action Fund project selections. Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I just wanted to say quickly, this was the first time I was able to read of this, and I was very excited by the applications that were received. So to Martha's Table and Habitat, congratulations on innovative thinking. It's really neat to blend social and environmental programs, and I think that's a great example of both of those applications.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chappelle.
Yes, with regards to funding the Climate Action Fund, I was just wanting to have staff clarify where the funds have come from, whether these were contributions from taxpayers putting into the fund or if this all city lent money.
Yes, thank you. Through your worship, these will be donated through public donations. The campaign will launch on December 1st and run till March 31st, where public donations be taken through the Kingston Community Credit Union and through the Canada Helps platform.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will call the vote on clause 1. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, we have nothing from Committee of the Whole. Information reports, if you have a question, just raise your hand as I read through them. Number 1, tender and contract awards subject to the established criteria for delegation of authority for the month of September 2020. Number 2, 2020 third quarter operating budget report. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Chappelle, I missed your hand. Is that a question for number 1 or for number 2? Number 1, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I'm looking at on page 152 with regards to Stiletto Consulting Group, $45,000. And I understand that this company is not a resident of the Kingston or Eastern Ontario, but from New Brunswick. And I'm wondering why we would, if this was put out to tender or if it was sole sourced. I'd like to get some clarification on it because I do believe we have substantive experience in the Kingston and Quinte area that can do consulting work. Because especially when we look at page 177, when we talk about the broadband consultation with Utilities Kingston, and we have a Kingston-based consulting company and analytics company there, which we so proudly boast about in the report, but not about Stiletto Consulting.
Commissioner Hugebos.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, so Stiletto Consulting is the consultant doing the work for the economic development strategy. And this was an additional opportunity to incorporate that work into this additional work, which forms a key part of the economic development strategy. So having that that synergy between that consultant and the work they're doing made sense in order to complete this work.
How much are we spending on the consulting project for Kingston Economic Development? What's the level?
And through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have that myself. Yeah, thank you, CAO Hurdle.
CAO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the amount was around $60,000. I can't remember, Councillor Chappelle, the exact amount, but I believe it was around that. It was the same as we committed to the integrated destination strategy a number of years ago. I can go back and get that exact number, but I think it was either 60 or around 65, something like that.
I look forward to that report. Thank you very much. That's it.
Okay, information report number 2, 2020 third quarter operating budget report. Number 3, new zoning bylaw project status update. Number 4, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Stroud. Councillor Stroud, you are muted.
Right. So I guess it's been a long time, this zoning bylaw work, and folks in the community are understandably anxious. It affects my district quite a bit, not having the new bylaw. So are the timelines in this report firm, or is it possible there may be further delays, is my question.
Mr. Agnew.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Patterson. So what we've put together is a timeline of what staff feel is achievable based on where we are in the process and the fact that we've already presented a version of the new zoning bylaw, and that was done some time ago. We've advanced to a second stage of that, and we're ready to start going out for consultation on that. We are confident in the schedule. The only thing I would acknowledge, if there are major pieces where we're, for example, asked to do additional work on something, or there's other major work that comes our way, those things outside of our control would be the only thing I would say that would impact the schedule. Otherwise, we've put together a schedule that we feel confident that we're able to deliver, and this is one of our primary responsibilities and objectives for completion in 2021.
Okay, so I guess it's not really a firm timeline, but there's a lot more detail in this report about where we are in the timeline than previously. So thank you for that. It has been, I think, almost 5 years since this first came to council. So that's longer than a term of council. So I think I don't need to make further.
Did you have any other questions, Councillor Stroud? I'm just looking at my speakers list.
Yeah. No, I just anticipate the final phase to come hopefully before this term of council ends. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I understand the logic here for not having inclusionary zoning, given that it doesn't correspond with the current provincial legislation on that. But I sort of recall a conversation that we had at the task force about separate work that needs to take place in preparation for something like inclusionary zoning, and was wondering, I can't quite remember it obviously, but was wondering if that's something that can happen as part of the zoning bylaw work, or whether it's a separate process altogether that just will not be initiated at this time.
Commissioner Agnew?
Thank you, and through you. For inclusionary zoning, what the legislation speaks to is the need for the preparation of a specific study, looking at like a needs identification and a whole scoping of work that has to go into justification of utilization of that as a planning tool. With recent changes that the provincial government has made through a number of the legislative bills that have come through under COVID specifically, inclusionary zoning is no longer available to a community like ours because we don't meet the specific criteria. It's really been geared now for communities that have a much stronger urban element to them, specifically like transit-oriented development. And so from that standpoint, it's no longer available to us. I think what our best opportunity, and we talk about this a little bit in the report, is to look at different ways to leverage community benefits with respect to affordable housing, because that legislation has also been changed in the last 12 months. So we need to do a study specifically related to that. And we have a 2-year time frame that the government has imposed to change our legislation to meet with the new provincial legislation that they just passed over the last couple of months. So that's where I feel confident for us to look at that specifically, because we do have the enabling legislation to utilize in Kingston and to evaluate that as a first step. And you know, anything can happen, the governments can change and legislation can change again. So I would say we should focus on what's before us right now, because that is a timeline that we need to meet legislatively. And for inclusionary zoning, we'll just continue to monitor that at the staff level to see if there's any provincial changes and report back to council, knowing that council has a strong interest in pursuing this as an opportunity to look at increasing our affordable housing stock. Right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So moving on, number 5, supplementary information report, 44 Albert Street and 620 Princess Street, application for heritage permit. We have no information reports from members of council. Miscellaneous business. So first of all, for our first part of this this motion, whereas members of council have indicated their choices to serve on the undernoted committees for the terms shown above, and whereas there are sufficient vacancies to accommodate each councillor, therefore be resolved that the following members of council be appointed effective December 1st, 2020 to serve on the undernoted committee, board, commissions, corporation. So Appeals Committee, we have Councillor Hutchison and Councillor McLaren. Arts Advisory Committee, Councillor Doherty, Councillor Neal. Central Pittsburgh Drain Committee, Councillor Bohm. Environment, Infrastructure and Transportation Policies Committee, Councillor Doherty, Councillor Holland, Councillor Neal, Councillor Osterhoff, Councillor Osanek, Councillor Stroud. Heritage Kingston, Councillor Doherty and Councillor Osterhoff. Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee, we have Councillor Doherty and Councillor Neal. Kingston Environmental Advisory Forum, Councillor Doherty, Councillor Neal. Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation, Councillor Doherty, Councillor Osterhoff. Rural Advisory Committee, Councillor Bohm, Councillor Osterhoff. Rural Urban Liaison Advisory Committee, Councillor Bohm, Councillor Osterhoff. Taxi Commission, Councillor Doherty. Tourism Kingston, Councillor Hill and Councillor Neal. Yes, Madam Deputy Clerk, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point out that with the acceptance of the addendum earlier this evening, Councillor Osanek was added to the Court of Revision Drainage Act, which would give the required 3 councillors, and Councillor Holland was included in the Nominations Advisory Committee. So those 2 committees would now have the full complement required.
Yes, thank you. So I'll just read those. So we have the Court of Revision Drainage Act, Councillor Bohm, Councillor Osanek, Councillor Hill. The Nominations Advisory Committee, Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Holland, Councillor Hutchison, Councillor Kiley, Councillor Neal, and Councillor Stroud. So those are the committees for which we have full complements. So I will put those aside for a moment. We will next look at the second category, whereas there are more applications for members of council than vacancies for the following committees. Therefore, be it resolved that council select the members of council to be appointed effective December 1st, 2020 to serve on the following committees, corporation, organization, working group. So as per usual, I'll just pause for a moment, and unless there's anybody that wishes to either add or subtract their name from, this would be the Awards Committee, Kingston, Frontenac, Lennox and Addington Public Health, and Kingston Police Services Board. Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Though I love serving with you and Councillor Holland, I'll withdraw my name from awards and take one person off that list.
Okay, Councillor Senek.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll do the same. That makes it nice and easy. Thank you.
Okay, so the Awards Committee will then consist of myself and then Councillor Boehm and Councillor Holland. Okay, so now we are left with the KFLNA Public Health Board and Kingston Police Services Board. So we will hold votes for those two committees. So first of all, Kingston, Frontenac, Lennox and Addington Public Health Board, we have Councillor McLaren, Councillor Holland, Councillor Neal and Councillor Stroud. And at this point, I will hand it over to Madam Deputy Clerk to conduct the vote, where each of us will have 3 votes.
Okay, so as we get started here, we do have 4 people. As Mayor Patterson said, there are, you have 3 votes. I would ask you to please raise your hand clearly and hold it up until I ask you to hold it, remove it down, just so I can make sure that we get an accurate count. All those supporting Councillor Holland? I see 7. Councillor McLaren? 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. I see 7. Councillor Neal? I see 8. And Councillor Stroud? I see 6. Okay, so to just to recap, we have 7 votes for Councillor Holland, 7 votes for Councillor McLaren, 8 votes for Councillor Neal, and 6 votes for Councillor Stroud, which will leave us with Councillors Holland, McLaren, and Neal.
Thank you. Next, Kingston Police Services Board. There is space for 1 councillor. We have 2 names, Councillor McLaren and Councillor Neal, so everybody will have 1 vote. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Okay, all those voting for Councillor McLaren, please raise your hand. I see 6. All those for Councillor Neal. And I see 6. We have a tie.
Madam Deputy Clerk, you have to remind me of the next procedural step. Is it pulling names out of a hat?
Unless we have a member of council who would be willing to vote in the alternate, in which case I could call the vote again. And if we do not have anybody who is volunteering to do that, then yes, we would be pulling a name from a hat.
Okay, so we'll call the vote 1 more time.
Okay, all those in support of Councillor McLaren. I see 6 hands again, which makes it unnecessary to call the vote for Councillor Neal. So please just bear with me while I prepare a couple of names to draw out of a hat.
Madam Deputy Clerk, I'll just pause for a minute. Councillor Chappelle. Point of order. You're just muted, Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Perhaps in this case, there's an opportunity to have both councillors just make brief remarks and then recall the vote.
I don't think I've ever allowed that before, and I am extremely reluctant to open up Pandora's box. I'll consider a point of order if there is one. Councillor Hill, I did see you.
Well, just that, you know, if this is our procedure, then we need to follow our procedure.
Yeah, I think my ruling would be not to do that. I think we have a pretty established procedure for how we do this. Councillor Hutchison, point of order. Go ahead.
In the past, council has done exactly that. So I don't think there's anything barring it. Most often we don't do it. People just sort of slot in mostly where they want to go. But Councillor Chappelle's suggestion has been used in the past.
I appreciate that it might have been used in the past. I don't think it's been used since I have been chair of council. And I think my ruling will stand only because I do know that we do a number of these elections, and I would be concerned about the precedent that we'd be setting there. So point of order is definitely noted. Councillor Holland, point of order.
Just to say that from my recollection, when it happened in the past, it wasn't in the context of breaking a tie.
It was in the context of breaking a tie.
It was not.
It was not. Okay. So with that, we are going to draw names out of the hat.
I don't have a hat, but I do have the lid of my water bottle. We have 2 names in here. I will pick out one. I don't know if I hold that up, if it can be seen. It says Councillor McLaren.
Councillor McLaren is noted for the Kingston Police Services Board. Okay, number 3, whereas there are fewer applications from members of council than vacancies for the following committees, therefore be it resolved that council select the members of council to be appointed effective December 1st, 2020 to serve on the following committees and corporations. So before I go through them one by one, are there any volunteers to put your names forward for any of the committees that are on this list? Councillor Osterhoff?
Yes, Mayor Patterson, I'm willing to let my name stand for the APC, Administrative Policies.
So first, I'm just going to pause there. Is there anybody else that wishes to put their name forward for the Administrative Policies Committee? No. Okay. So the Administrative Policies Committee will consist of Councillor Bohm, Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Kiley, Councillor McLaren, and Councillor Osterhoff. And Councillor Stroud. Okay. Any other volunteers to put their names forward? Councillor Holland.
I will put my name for, actually, can I ask when Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority meets?
Madam Deputy Clerk or a current member of the board can jump in.
Through you, Mayor Patterson, the Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority meets on the 4th Wednesday of every month at 6:30 p.m.
Fourth Wednesday, it's monthly. Okay. Okay, I'll put my name down.
Okay, so I have Councillor Osterhoff, Councillor Osanik, Councillor Holland. Is there anybody else that wishes to push their name forward? So I'm just looking right now at the Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority. So there are room for 4 councillors. I have 3 that have volunteered. Do I have another volunteer? Councillor Stroud? You're volunteering?
Yeah, yes. I may have a transportation issue, however. Are the meetings at the district office out by Little Cat? Is that correct?
Councillor, are you meeting virtually right now, or are you meeting in person?
right now, because of COVID, we're doing it through Microsoft Teams, but if COVID is over, we do meet at the conservation area on Division Street.
Okay, so currently no transportation issue. If it's at Division Street, I can actually make it in the summer, but if there's too much snow on the road, I wouldn't be able to make it unless I had a carpool partner.
Okay,
So I will. So I will volunteer.
Okay. Is there anybody else then that wishes to put their name forward for the Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority? Okay, so seeing no other names, the four councillors will be Councillor Holland, Councillor Oosterhoff, Councillor Osanik, and Councillor Stroud. Okay. Is there anybody else that wishes to volunteer for a committee? Councillor Kiley? Councillor Stroud, point of order.
Just you just stated Councillor Osanik on Conservation Authority, but I believe it was Councillor Holland.
So there are space for four councillors. So on the addeds, Councillor Osanik had already put her name forward.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Through you, I can do the Court of Revision Municipal Act.
It's a big commitment, Councillor Kiley. Are you sure you're up for that? Okay. Do I have a couple of other volunteers for the Court of Revision Municipal Act? Councillor Hill and Councillor Osanik. Thank you very much. Okay, so Councillor Kiley, Councillor Hill, and Councillor Osanik. Thank you. For the Court of Revision Drainage Act, we have three councillors there. Okay, is there anybody else that wishes to volunteer for the remaining committees? We are looking for two councillors for Arts, Recreation, Community Policies Committee, one additional councillor for Kingston Economic Development Corporation, a councillor for Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee, an additional councillor for Planning Committee, and an additional councillor for Sustainable Kingston Corporation. Councillor McLaren.
Arts, Recreation, Policies Committee, I'll go on that.
Councillor Doherty?
I'll also go on that one, the Arts and Recreation Community Policy. Thanks.
Thank you. If there are no other names for Arts, Recreation, Community Policies Committee, it will consist of Councillor Bohm, Councillor Doherty, Councillor Holland, Councillor Hutchison, Councillor McLaren, and Councillor Osanik. Thank you. Okay, any other volunteers for the remaining committees? Councillor Holland.
Kingston Economic Development Corporation.
Okay. There are no other volunteers. Okay, so the Kingston Economic Development Corporation will be Councillor Hill, Councillor Holland, and Councillor Oosterhoff. Okay, so we are now down to the Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee, Planning Committee, and Sustainable Kingston Corporation. Looking for one volunteer for each of those three committees. Councillor Neal.
I'll go back on the MAC committee.
Okay, thank you. So there are no other names forward on that. Then Councillor Neal will be the rep for the Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee. So now we're down to Planning Committee and Sustainable Kingston Corporation. Councillor McLaren.
I'll try Sustainable Kingston.
So Councillor McLaren as the rep for Sustainable Kingston. It leaves Planning Committee. Now we've already amended the bylaw for 5 councillors, so we can go with that. I'll just do a last call. Anybody else for Planning Committee? Okay, so seeing crickets for that one, I think we are good to go. So What I'm going to ask for is a mover and a seconder to confirm all of the council appointments that we've just completed. Moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Councillor McLaren. Is everybody comfortable with those? Do you want me to read through them again, or is everyone's good? Okay. So with that, we will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, so on to number 4. Whereas the City of Kingston Emergency Response Plan requires an emergency designate for the mayor and an emergency designate alternate for the mayor. Therefore, be resolved in accordance with the City of Kingston Emergency Response Plan, Councillor Bone be appointed for a term of 1 year or until replaced as the emergency designate for the mayor. And that in accordance with the City of Kingston Emergency Response Plan, Councillor Holland be appointed for a term of 1 year or until replaced as the emergency designate alternate for the mayor. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Hill. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Number 5, that is requested by Christina Thorne, Downtown Kingston Toastmasters. Council proclaimed November 19th, 2020 as Downtown Kingston Toastmasters 10th Anniversary Day. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor McLaren. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, on to new motions. We have one new motion this evening, moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Chappelle. Whereas the City of Kingston developed the Cataract Way Estates Business Park several years ago, and there are lots still for sale. Whereas lot 452 is a heavily treed coniferous forest which abuts EAP lands to the west and the section of the KMP Trail between Centennial Drive and Sydenham Road to the north. Whereas the wildlife in the 2 wetlands bisecting the KMP Trail along this stretch would benefit from additional treed buffer lands, especially once lot 438 adjacent to lot 452 is fully developed. And whereas in the City of Kingston Strategic Plan 2019 to 2022, one objective is to enhance and expand green spaces, protect wetlands, and increase the tree canopy through greening initiatives. Whereas Kingston City Council unanimously declared a climate emergency on March 5th, 2019, and urban trees such as those on lot 452 provide numerous ecosystem goods and services by providing shade, habitat for wildlife, removal of air pollutants, and the removal and storage of atmospheric CO2. Therefore, be resolved that staff be directed to report back to council with details of the process to remove and change the land designation of lot 452 in the Cataract Way Estates Business Park from the employment lands inventory. Councillor Osanek, you have the floor.
Great, thank you very much, Your Worship. The Cataract Way Estates Business Park was passed by council 10 years ago. It now houses the Canada Royal Milk Company and other businesses. It's 70% sold out. What we're talking about in this motion is removing one lot, that's lot 452, from our industrial lands, which is 3.7 acres. Where exactly is lot 452? If the clerks could maybe just put up the first slide of the diagram. So lot 452 is the pink highlighted lot, sort of shaped like that. It's on the north side of Resources Road, and we have the KP Trail on the north side, with the big pond on the west side of the KP Trail. That's zoned open space. And on the right-hand side, which is the east side of that pink triangle there, is a narrow creek bed zoned EPA. Lot 452 is a pine tree coniferous forest. If you go to the next slide, please, with the clerks. Next slide. This is a view of lot 452 when you're actually walking on the trail. And for the next slide too, please. That there's more pictures of it. So there's not many woodlots in Kingston that are all pine trees, especially south of the 401 in the urban area. Right now, this provides buffer protection for the wildlife that's next to the EPA, but also privacy for the hikers on the KP Trail because it blocks the view of the businesses year round because it's a coniferous forest that are already in the business park, like the Royal Milk Company, which is just on the other side of the trees, but this provides like a natural tree-lined view as you're walking on the KP Trail. Lot 452 also meant, oh yeah, I just said that. So immediately west of lot 452, if we just go down to the next slide, that's that green highlighted area, and it's called lot 438. And it's my understanding that it's basically sold for development. And when it does get developed, like those trees are all in the lot, they'll probably be gone. We don't know that, but likely they'll be gone because it's going to be a business there. So once those trees are removed, when you're walking on the KP Trail, you will really notice it because Resources Road is built up higher than the KP Trail, and it's just not going to feel like you're walking through a forest like it is right now when you walk through this area. And I think that, like when we did this business park 10 years ago, I think all of us who've been on planning committee, sometimes what you see on paper when you then see it actually in person when it's built out is different. It's not what you imagined it to be, especially for an untrained, professional urban planner like the public. It's really hard to visualize what these business parks are like. So now 10 years later, we do have Resources Road. We do know that across the street from Resources Road, where we put the Canada Royal Milk Company, that all the trees in that Royal Milk Company had to be removed. And now that we see Resources Road and Centennial Drive, they're going to open up Centennial Drive. It's like, wow, like that forest along Resources Road, it's just absolutely beautiful. And to think that like we're going to be losing that chunk in 452, since we can't help that 438 has already been bought, we need to preserve lot 452. It's 3.7 acres, but it's coniferous forest. And I think it's just going to look completely different if 452 goes once 438 is also developed. That's basically all I can say. Some of us received an email today from a resident, and it said, my wife and I often go for walks in this area because it's close to nature, but we're still south of the 401. There's a significant number of bird and animal species that we see on the trail right behind this lot. We see muskrat, coyote, otters, green herons, great blue herons, great egrets, spotted sandpipers, solitary sandpipers, belted kingfisher, and many other forest birds. Because the city of Kingston does not have a natural area south of the 401, I strongly recommend that this area is preserved for industrial development. So I think that's my 5 minutes. I'm just asking my fellow councillors to please let's save lot 452. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Chappelle.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Over the course of the spring around Royal Milk, there was a lot of garbage that was blown from waste that was from the construction site. And the Canada Royal Milk, their staff and contractors helped clean up the area. And I became very familiar with this area because I've taken many walks being in my district. And I came across a number of residents who regularly go out and pick up trash and what along that area. And they use that as a way to stay healthy. But they also love the fact that the lot 452 that we're talking about is such a great little access point to catch onto the KP Trail and then walk back and catch it back to Sydenham Road. They do a great loop. It's a wonderful space. And as we industrialize, I think having such nature within that complex is going to be very beneficial to the workers who want to take a break at their lunchtime and maybe walk into the forest. But the other aspect of this, backing onto the EPA lands, is we don't own the property immediately to the east of that milk plant, and so this will help ensure that at least we can control it being part of the city to have that urban park within that area. And I certainly feel that the motion sort of encapsulates exactly what we're trying to do as a council. And I think it's a great first step. And we can even call it Osanic Park, but we're done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I think it's always a great ambition to try and protect these natural spaces, but I've also heard a considerable amount of concern expressed at council and elsewhere that we don't have sufficient industrial and commercial land available for development. So I'm kind of, well, I guess what I'm hoping is that if this motion is passed, that it would go back for review around sort of those issues, and not necessarily, we're not making the decision tonight, I assume, to protect this property. Is that correct?
So to clarify, so the resolve clause is to ask staff to report back to council with details of the process to remove and change the land designation. So no, so we're not making the decision tonight. This would be a motion to ask staff to report back to us with the process that would be required to make that decision.
So I guess that I would motion in that context. I really would like to see, you know, how this fits into the economic development lands that we have, how critical it is to that function, whether or not there's some other kind of strategies that could be used to buffer the trail with by preserving some of those trees. But I think it would be hasty at this point to say, you know, given the lack of available industrial space, to say at this point without a pretty thorough staff report that in fact we can dispose of it in this way. Thank you.
Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so this motion, and I'm going to make the argument I made at planning. So those on planning can just, you know, stuff up their ears. But this motion just asks for report, as the mayor just said, and Councillor Hill referenced. And so I'm not likely to vote against having a report. But when the report is made, I'm interested in whether an acceptable principled compromise can be made. Working off of what Councillor Hill said to some extent. That is, I think we have to look at the need, the availability of business development lots, but also the cost of developing them. And I don't know if there's someone on staff that can give us, Mr. Hugenboss is here, I see, a rough idea of what that lot is worth, because I know in our business development, we work it is we spend the money and then we hope to get the money back by developing the lot. So I'm not saying this is a shutdown argument, but I think it's important to know. So, Mr. Hugenboss?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, thank you, Councillor Hutchison, for the question. So that's correct. The city's model is to invest in servicing employment lands and then recouping that investment through the sale, not necessarily making a profit, but recouping that through the sales. So I definitely, through the staff report, if this motion passes, we'll bring the financial information back. But yes, we are advertising prices for the lands to be sold in the neighborhood of $130,000, $150,000 per acre. So you can see that is about the amount of investment that the city makes through purchasing lands, through doing the planning approvals, to servicing them, and all that entails. In order to recoup those costs, it's in that neighborhood of over $100,000 per acre. If that answers your question, but there will be more details back with the staff report on the financials. Yeah.
So what I would like to, against that backdrop, what I would like to consider, be considered in a report is whether we can preserve this, like, what is the forest worth? Well, the forest is worth more than money. Okay, that's really the argument that the two mover and seconder are making here. And I'm open to that argument. I'm just wondering if we could preserve as much of the business lot as possible, such that a business could be on it, there's 3.7 acres of land. Some of our lots are only 1 acre. And if we twin that with an assertive tree planting program, where, you know, maybe people could pay, I would, you know, contribute to putting somewhat larger trees in so that in 10 years you might actually see something there. Not, and then that way we could build up the buffer. And I notice if you look on the map there, you'll see there are areas where it starts above 438, where in along 452, where a better buffer could be put in. And I agree with Councillor Sanik that when you're walking the KMP trail, it would be better to have it buffered from the business park. And so I find myself stuck in the middle here somewhat. And I'm just asking whether we could consider those kind of measures to make this work.
Mr. Hugenboss?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Yeah, absolutely. So we can provide that information in the council, in the staff report back to council. I'm not sure when that will be, but when we do bring that report back to council, we will include information on the buffers, how far it's set back, and if there are other options to explore. But that information will come to council for its decision.
Okay, with that in mind, I can certainly vote for this. And I want to say I'm not interested in compromising the whole concept of this motion out of existence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the motion? Councillor Sanik, you have the last word if there's anything you want to add.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have to say, after just hearing this discussion, I feel like I'm a little bit misled with that last word, the last phrase of the motion, which was to start the process, because I was hoping that this motion was to start the process to remove. Now I hear that it's going to be a staff report and there's going to be, you know, like, then I hope the staff report will have options. And one option might be what Councillor Hutchison said, is to, you know, develop half of it and leave the other half, but I'm looking to take all of it. This is like 3.7 acres. Or like, that's it, 3.7 acres. We're not talking about 875 acres like some forests I know down the street, right? This is a measly 3.7 acres. And honestly, in this point in time, does economics always have to trump the environment? How many times over the last couple of years have we had that in the world, right? Or let's talk about Kingston. Like, when's the last time that our city's tree coverage has been done? We're supposed to have, for a healthy watershed in a municipality, over 30% in the urban area. And it's been 2 council terms that we haven't even had the tree coverage recalculated. And the last time it was done, it was less than 20, it was in the low 20s in Kingston. And that was going down from the time it was before that. Like, we have in our strategic plan to protect our wetlands, expand our green spaces. I'll just talk for like 60 more seconds. That's all I have. But 2 weeks ago, when we had that nice weekend, I was there walking back and forth. There was like about 20, you know, different couples, families, hikers, everybody. And I went to every person who passed me. I stood there and I went with every person right at lot 452. And I said, do you want this saved, right? What does it mean to you? And everybody said, yeah, like, don't take it. Look at those nice pine trees, right? And they all said, I support city council expanding their green spaces, or in this case, saving the green spaces. So that's all I'll say. And we'll get this staff report, but I feel like now, like, that wording of the motion is not what I thought the wording of the motion was actually going to be when staff report back what the process is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so certainly my interpretation of the motion is that staff will come back with a report that will lay out what that process is, but there will be a decision point at that point what to do, and so we'll have to get it at that point. CEO Hurdle, is there anything you wanted to add?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So I would like to provide some comments to that because I have worked with Councillor Osanik and Councillor Chappelle on the wording. The intent here is to provide a report back that will lay out the process to actually redesignate and remove this lot. So that's what the report will focus on that particular process. So it will identify, obviously, the land designation change that's required and the process there. It will also identify the financial implication because we have to as part of the process for employment lands. But it will focus on how we actually remove the lot and change the land designation as directed by council.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will call the vote on new motion number 1. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, moving on. Are there any notices of motion tonight? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Clerk, Ross, for minutes, please.
Moved by Councillor McLaren, seconded by Councillor Hutchison, that the minutes of special City Council meeting number 2020-27 held Tuesday, October 27th, 2020, and regular City Council meeting number 2020-28 held Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020 be confirmed.
All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, we have some communications. Is there any other business? Mr. Clerk, Ross, for bylaws, please.
And as a result of the deferral of the procedure bylaw and the associated committee bylaw amendment, the bylaws number 1 and 2 have been withdrawn. So our first vote is moved by Councillor Holland and seconded by Councillor Hill, that bylaws 3, 4, 6, and 5 be given their first and second reading.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
And moved by Councillor Holland, seconded by Councillor Hill, that bylaws 3, 4, 6, and 5 be given their third reading.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, with that, a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor McLaren, seconded by Councillor Neal. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. We're adjourned. Thanks very much, everybody.